Welcome to the 56th Chicago International Film Festival. My name is Anthony Kaufman. I'm a senior programmer here at the festival. We're very excited to have you all with us for our discussion of City So Real, this epic documentary about our city. It's quite an amazing ride. For those of you who have seen all of it, you obviously know what I'm talking about. For those of you who are maybe midway in the series, obviously urge you to check out the rest. Hope there's not too many spoilers in the conversation, but I think we obviously need to dig into episode 5. Such an amazing work. So we have a very impressive group of folks here with us today. Of course, Steve James, the director, Oscar-nominated filmmaker, such incredible films as Hoop Dreams, The Interrupters, Abacus, Small Enough to Jail, and incredible series work on America to Me recently, and of course here with City So Real. Thanks so much for coming, Steve. And Zak Piper, the producer and sound recordist on the project, who was integral to making this mammoth enterprise work. We also have with us Dr. Amara Enyia, strategist, public policy expert, social impact professional, and one of my personal favorite candidates in the film. But no less, of course, Neal Sáles-Griffin, entrepreneur, investor, nonprofit leader, and teacher, and also an inspiring and wonderful character in the film. Thanks so much for joining us. Moderating, we're very honored to have with us Natalie Moore, award-winning journalist for WBEZ. She covers segregation, inequality, race, housing, economic development, food injustice, violence. Many other issues has been broadcast on the BBC and NPR. She's the author of the award-winning book, The South Side, A Portrait of Chicago and American Segregation, writes a column for Chicago Sun-Times. Her work has been published widely in publications such as Essence, Ebony, In These Times, the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Guardian. Thank you so much, Natalie. I will let you all take it from here. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. And I just want to say, so I've been watching City So Real this week, and I didn't expect anything less of Steve James, but there's so many people who come to Chicago to do stories, to film, to do episodes, and I just always am pretty disappointed. And I was not with this. And it was, a lot of it is like what we do in journalism, like show, don't tell. I love that there wasn't a narrator. It was just like loads of verite and really going all over the city, which I appreciated. It felt like Chicago, and it was funny. It was poignant. I do have to say, if I had to give someone, best supporting role, it would be Ricky Hendon. Boy, was he oh, wow. And I think what stayed with me the most were some of those conversations in people's homes, the dinner party, the folks in Bridgeport, and just I felt like I was dropping in a lot of times and hearing how people really feel about people like me. These polite conversations or how people may present in public. So I just want to thank you for this work. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a love letter to the city, but it's also fair and, just lots of things. So many questions to start off with you, Steve. In wanting to tell a story about Chicago, why did you choose the mayoral race to do it? And Zak, I don't know if any of these apply to you to jump in. And then the second question would be, this was supposed to be a feature film at first, and then it became episodic. And so I would imagine it's because you had so much great material, but I would like to hear some about the decision making.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Natalie, for those comments. And your work is so amazing. So that means a lot coming from you, and that you're moderating this panel. This is a thing I'd wanted to do for years, a kind of mosaic portrait of Chicago, but wanted to do it at a time when Chicago found itself in a significant moment, let's say. Of course, it always feels like Chicago's in a significant moment, but I think with this mayoral election, this most wide open of mayoral elections in memory, if not history, rolling around, and that it was coinciding with the trial of Jason Van Dyke. It just seemed like the right time to do this. And we knew, Zach and I knew as we went into it, is that we didn't want to just have it be a political film or, a film about a race. It's very much a political film in a lot of ways, and it's about a trial in a number of ways, but we wanted it to be this portrait of the city and the people that live here and what they think. They're the heart of this story, it seems to me. And that's kind of what led it to being as long as it was. I mean, not only did a lot of stuff happen, we didn't anticipate Burke getting indicted. We didn't anticipate a number of the things that happened during the course of the story while we were filming. But I think what really drove the decision to make it bigger, as much as anything, was we met so many remarkable people and were able to eavesdrop in on their lives, and we just did not want that to be sacrificed for the sake of a narrative about politics.
And I'll just add that by the time we filmed up into in 2019 the first election, the mayoral election, and we didn't film that month or 6 weeks to the runoff, but by the time all these scenes were cut together, it was about 12 hours long, and it was trying to make a decision saying, like, these are all the scenes that have that bring something to the project, to the film, and is this let's take a hard look. It's 12 hours. Is it a film, or potentially is it episodic? And with consult from Diane Wireman and the folks at Participant Media, we came to decide it was a series.
Neal and Amara, what's it like looking at it now that the interviews are over? And what made you decide to let the crew into your lives in such an intimate way, your family, and, other aspects of your lives?
Amara, I'd love to give it to you first, please.
Well, I would say that it was looking back on the film, watching it, it was really interesting because I realized how much you miss when your head is sort of down in the trenches, just campaigning. There are so many things that I didn't catch, so many nuances, narratives that were going on. And watching it almost a year later, I was like, wait a minute, what? And even some things that I was involved in some events and some activities that happened, seeing it from that third eye, that other perspective, it really, you saw it in an almost more objective way. So there were certain things that happened that I was aware of, heard of, but then when I saw it on camera, I got a sense for like the vibe in a way that I didn't get because I was so, head down trying to just do the campaign.
Can you give an example?
Well, I don't want to go give too much away, but I can recall there was a press conference with one of the other candidates. So they sort of, the candidates varied from super experienced, decades of political experience, having been in the game, and then those who are newer novices, if you will. And so one of the candidates in particular has decades of experience and was doing this press conference. And if you read the press or the news reports, you would think this is such a formidable campaign. It's almost inevitable. These are the heavy hitters. But seeing the actual press conference, I was like, that's it. I mean, it was a disconnect between the narrative that's pushed and the narrative that was prevailing at the time and the vibe and just seeing how it actually was playing out. And that was very startling to me. But I think for allowing the camera crew and Steve and Zach to sort of shadow, that was partly because a lot of the ethos of our campaign was about just being open, transparent. What we were doing it for the people of Chicago. There was no, backroom this and that, and really wanting people to actually see what the experience was like, but also to see the motivation and just this is what it is. There's no hidden agenda. There's nothing else but this. This is what we're focused on. And then allowing them to capture that was just a way of allowing them in to see what it looks like to run the kind of campaign that we were in.
Yeah, and I just would add that, when I think about repping my city and just being from Chicago, growing up on the South Side, and I want to tell people what it's like here when I interact with people from all over the world all the time now. And this is what I would point them to, right? There's what's depicted in the media about Chicago and different places, but this is the real story. Like, this is what's going on in my city. And I think this is an invitation for everybody to be a part of it. So when I watch it, there's a part of me that gets back into candidate mode. I got a little bit of, my heart gets really heavy. I get a little stressed out. I remember all those moments and all those scenes and all those people and places I had to deal with. And magically, like Amara said, Steve and Zach and the rest of their crew were just in the background. You didn't even know they were there. It wasn't even a thing. And the way that Steve approached me early on, because I think we were one of the first to announce that we were running, he just said, "Hey, I'm just doing this project, and I wanted to know if from time to time I could reach out to you and maybe meet up with whatever you're doing." And I was like, cool. Like, I was so excited about the idea that someone wanted to add a lot more transparency to the process, because I don't think the signature experience that both Amara and I had to go through so dramatically has been so well documented before. And there's even more probably that he has that he wasn't able to put into the film. So it gives us room to talk about access and democracy in Chicago in a way that I've never really seen or experienced. And I'm saying that firsthand as a first-time candidate. So it's amazing. And it's not even about really politics or our campaigns. It's really about the people of Chicago. So I care far less about seeing myself in that film than all those real people on the street who he got to know and who I got to know and who Amara got to know, that, we want to make sure feel like they're heard, have a voice and a presence, and, have more opportunity to be activated here.
If I could just add one thing, it was interesting when we approached candidates, Natalie, like to try to get their cooperation to see if we could embed some. Now, we knew we weren't going to try to embed with 21 at one point and 14 eventually, because that would be madness. But we picked people that we thought were interesting. We did approach some of the front runner candidates, and they were usually immediately very welcoming because they saw the big camera and they thought we were just regular news media. And then as soon as they found out what we were doing, they were like, "No, thank you." And so
was that Al Gore, Steve? Was it Al Gore?
Yes, they tried to take us out of the Al Gore meeting.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
But with candidates like Neal and Amara, not only were they receptive to letting us into their campaign, they actually loved the idea of what we were doing, because we talked about this as being a kind of portrait of the city too at that time. So they really took to that idea, and I think it's to their credit and our benefit that they were so generous with that.
And Neal said that you all were in the background. It was like you didn't even know that the crew was there, but it still is a crew. It's cameras. How? And because you're in such disparate places in the city, whether you're at a Black church or you're talking to, some police officers in Bridgeport, how did the crew navigate the racial politics of the city, as well as getting those folks to forget that you were there and to be honest?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, Zach and I are white, as you can see. We did have a more diverse team in the field helping us. And some of the most striking moments in the Black community, in our view, of that kind of candor and honesty, were ones where our crew was quite diverse in the field. Where Kevin Shaw was one of the DPs, Bailey was our sound person. When Willie is giving that speech at the fundraiser when you first meet him, and he's sort of talking real politics about Black and white, he didn't give that speech just anywhere. He didn't give that speech just anywhere. And he stopped giving that speech at a certain point. I think when he thought Republicans were going to support him. But so it helped to have a diverse team. Now, when we went to the Bridgeport barbershop, that was me and Zach. Because that was not going to happen if Kevin came along.
Right.
It just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So we were intentional. Now,
Yes.
I have found, and we have found, Zach and I have found, even as white filmmakers, as there is a receptivity in communities of color to what we are doing, and a willingness and a courage to open up and express. Neal and Amara are perfect examples of that. And I feel like, that's always harder with white subjects, because if it gets to be about race, it's always such a delicate thing to walk that line with white people talking about race. Whereas I have found over the years, and in this project especially, that the willingness of people to trust us and have the courage to let themselves be themselves before our cameras is always amazing to me.
And if I could just add a little off something Neal said earlier, the idea that people do want to be heard. And I just think of the example, I don't know if this gives anything away, but there's a scene that people recall often when they talk about the series, where we were trying to go back. We finished filming. We were trying to go back to our car, and we, punched in Lyft, and we got a Lyft driver picked us up, and we ended up filming with her. We weren't planning on, but she was very revealing to us, and we ended up, it was a conversation about race, and it was just Steve and I, and I just, I felt like in that moment with her specifically, she, took the opportunity. We had the camera to really open up to us and share.
We've already started getting some great questions come in, so I'm going to weave those with what I was planning to ask, and some of them dovetail. This one is: every single edit and juxtaposition between neighborhoods carries political weight, and you handle it so beautifully. How can you talk about the editing process and the mosaic created?
Well, yeah, thank you for the comment. Myself and my co-editor David Simpson were the primary editors on the series, and we've worked together a lot over the years, going all the way back to a series we did back in the early 2000s called The New Americans. But I think that we love the idea, and I think it's a feature of Kartemquin films in general, is that we love the idea of juxtaposition. We love the idea of not of creating juxtapositions that create interesting contradictions or that undermine assumptions. And so that was sort of born into this project. The barbershops that we've talked about. Once we filmed in that South Side barbershop, and that was another one where the diverse team made a huge difference in the amount of candor that was captured there. That inspired us to go to the Bridgeport barbershop. That scene said, we were like, oh, well, black barbershops are kind of an iconic tradition, right? And especially here in Chicago, as some people say, they make series about black barbershops. We're like, well, what do white guys talk about in barbershops?
Yeah.
And so that's why we found that Bridgeport barbershop. And then, of course, in the edit, we preserved that juxtaposition, and we looked for those kind of opportunities to create interesting juxtapositions. Because the last thing, I always feel like one of our biggest duties as filmmakers is to challenge people's assumptions and not let people sit there and make easy judgments. And so a lot of the juxtapositions that we do are often about that very thing, about you're thinking one thing coming out of this scene. Well, how about this? Let this complicate your understanding.
And, even as a reporter, sometimes I feel like, oh, here we go again, going to a black barbershop to get comment from the black community.
Right.
But that the turn was going to the white barbershop. I'm like, I've never seen anybody go to white barbershop. And it's one of the questions is, how did you find the barbershops and pick them?
Well, actually, it was one of our field producers, Fennell Doremus, found the barbershop in Bridgeport for us. And I think we were just looking for a barbershop that, I think we were actually naming Bridgeport as a candidate. And she I can't remember how she knew of this barbershop, but she did. And she went in and talked to Joe. And then, we followed up, and we've actually been back there a number of times. We went back there in episode 5, and yeah.
Natalie, may I offer a comment here?
Yeah, of course.
Very, very quickly, just about that barbershop scene. I actually ran a couple barbershops when I was in college on the South Side. So it was amazing. I agree with you. The scene that he captured, though, the heat of that moment, the energy in that moment was real. It was super real. And it's hard to get something like that in that way. So the way that I like to summarize the feeling I got watching this film for the first time with Steve at the True False Film Festival was that March, in like a room full of like 200 or 300, mostly all white people in Missouri, was contrast creates meaning. And every episode and every moment and every scene in that film, there's some contrast occurring between the different forces, right? Black, white, like north, south, all the different components there are coming together. And I found it very authentic. And very like how much I grew up on the South Side, going to these different Black barbershops and having these really thick conversations. But at the end of it, still saying, I love you, man. Let's move on and let's go back to what we have to do here to make the city better. So that was the proudest moment I had, is how I'm not going to spoil it, but at the end of that scene, even though it got heated, it was cool at the end of the day. And I'm so grateful that he caught that moment.
Well, in that white barbershop, when we went there, because Fennell found it for us, I'd never been there. We had no idea those were cops until the way you find out. The way you find out in the scene when you're watching it that they are ex-cops is pretty much the way it happened for us too. And we're a big believer, I think, as filmmakers, in preserving the same sort of sense of discovery and surprise that we experienced as makers. The audience too. It's easy in editing to make yourself to strip away that and make it look like, oh, well, we knew all along there were cops, and but we love the idea of that being revealed the way it did, because it was so surprising to us, and we figured, why not let the audience have that same surprise?
Steve, I didn't know that until just now, man. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal your contrast creates meaning line.
Please, it's all yours.
Yeah, that's great. So watching episodes 1 through 4 feels like such a long time ago.
It does, yeah.
In a place far, far away. And then we get to episode 5. Neal and Amara, can you talk about what it's been like doing your work in Chicago these past 7 months, and talk a little bit about what you were doing in that episode, which was really, mutual aid type work?
Sure. So I last year I actually had the opportunity to leave Chicago for large portions of time. I started doing a lot more work that was national and international. And so it wasn't until the pandemic and all the lockdowns set in that I was sort of grounded back in the city. And then in May, at the end of May and June, when the uprising started, I found myself pulled back into the work that I had been doing when I was a candidate and before, as an organizer and that sort of work, which was completely spontaneous. It was just like a switch was flipped, where for the last year I had been working sort of higher level policy in Africa and all this other stuff. But then all of a sudden, when everything popped off, if you will, in Chicago, it was like a switch just flipped, and I was immediately on the phone talking to people that I knew, had worked with on a lot of that community level, hyper local, mutual aid organizing work, and we just got right to it. And so when everything happened, what the scenes that I'm in the 5th episode was actually me providing materials to an organization that was mobilizing people who were going to sort of do this community safety, public safety monitoring in their own neighborhoods on their own blocks. It was something that I had talked about a lot as a candidate, just as far as moving away from this notion of heavy police presence, and really redefining what community safety looks like. And part of that strategy was we have to have these sort of hyper local networks that can protect their own communities, that can monitor their own communities. But with everything that happened, it was so immediate that I found that I had to hop on the phone and just start calling people. And we put together a network across the city of folks who were doing this work. And so Steve and Zach were able to come to one of the sites where we were just distributing the materials. And that was just, it was the mutual aid networks that emerged out of that, where people helping each other, people providing food for each other. We started talking more about cooperative economic models and what it means to care about the collective. And this is the worst and best possible opportunity for that to happen. So it was like going back pre-campaign to the work that I was doing, but it was also, it just showed how much that kind of work was needed in the city at that time.
Yeah, and thanks, Amara. And Natalie, just to build on that, if there's one part that I regret not being in the film as much, and this is just by nature of design, is the signature collection process, right? So we met with thousands of people, tens of thousands of people on the street to get them to sign those signature forms. And I know we can't do that anymore, but what I learned on the street is what happened in that 5th episode and the nature of that work. So I learned that most people in Chicago just want to have great opportunities, great jobs, work for good people, work with good people, and for everybody to have a fair chance to be successful here. That's what I learned on the street. And, once the campaign ended, I licked my wounds, gave a quick TED talk, and replenished my bank account a little bit. And then I got back to work. So I was like, all right, I didn't win the mayoral race. That's fine. I learned a ton about what the city needs. So why don't I give the city what it needs and in my own way? So I'm an investor and I'm a teacher. I work with lots of young people to get them started with building businesses and writing software and, solving problems in our city and our communities. And at the same time, I'm investing over $1 million a year now in, primarily Chicago-based technology companies. And I'm in the process of doing even more for underrepresented and Black founders. So what's happening in episode 5 is just getting back to work. And then I guess the final piece is I have a huge family that all grew up on the south and west sides of Chicago. 16 aunts and uncles, probably over 100 family members by blood all around here. And when the pandemic hit and when the George Floyd situation went down, it was chaos and everybody was struggling. And we don't have much. So I had to go around and check in on as many people as I could, give them the resources that they needed, deliver groceries and, any other materials that they need, check in on folks. Like we had real people who died, like real people who got sick and real people whose lives are fundamentally changed because of this year and what's been happening. And it was already bad. Like even before the pandemic and before all this, the situation in Chicago was dire and it wasn't getting better before it was getting worse. So for this to add insult to injury, all of us had to step up. So I'm super proud that Amara, myself, a lot of the other people that you see in the film decided to do good for all the people around us in our communities, because there was no hesitation. I canceled any days off, all vacation, no free time. Let's just get to work and make sure all of our people are taken care of.
Zach, can you talk about the sound of the series and the music?
Sure. Well, for the sound, it's the regular challenges of verite filmmaking where, the unique part of this is that we don't necessarily have the relationships that we cultivate in a film where we're following just a single person or, a single small group of people. Because we cast this wide net, a lot of times we're just coming up and using sometimes a camera sound, sometimes a lot of times the boom mic, always the boom mic. And then occasionally we have the opportunity to put loud mics on people. So it was really a situation by situation, way that we dealt with it. And with the music, we had a wonderful music supervisor who really, came up with lots of tracks, and which all, by the way, the entire series, with few exceptions, all the music is from Chicago artists. I think it spans the earliest recording is from 1961. The most recent is from this summer. So it ends up touching 7 different decades, which is, pretty great. Excited about that. And yeah, our music supervisor really kicked up a lot of different genres and, up and coming folks, established folks, legends, Jerry Butler, Gene Chandler, so on. But
don't forget the Bucket Boys.
And the Bucket Boys, Chicago Soundbox, right? That's Chicago Soundbox. So it was it's because I'm a great lover of music, and in particular Chicago music. It was special for me.
Yeah, I mean, Zak really contributed to I mean, Don, who was our music supervisor, did an amazing job, and Zak has a specialty in older soul and blues, I guess you could say, and from Chicago that he's made a study of, and so he was a real asset.
Sean asks, do you think the documentary confirms Chicago's reputation or challenges it? And then I want to add another piece to that. After the experience of making this series and being in it, has your relationship to the city changed, or do you view the city any differently?
Is that for me?
For everybody.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to yield the floor.
All right, I'll start. I'm really interested in knowing Amara and Steve's responses, but first of all, when I saw that question, I was like, what is our reputation? Like, I guess I could assume I know what that means, but that being said, I really appreciate your clarification, Natalie, because I mean, this is my city, and I felt like when I watched this film, it was a reflection of it, an authentic reflection of it, a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it, way more than I would have ever imagined. So I'm grateful for that. That being said, it's also showing all of us, meaning the things that are good and the things that are bad about our city. And with that kind of combination, I think it's beautiful. And I'm proud of it. And I want people to see it because it shows you that there's so much more to it than what you get in the headline, right? You talk to one type of politician, they're going to say Chicago's a war zone. You talk to another type of politician, they're going to say it's all flowers and rainbows. No, it's all of that and everything in between. And it's just like everywhere else too. So if anything, when people watch this film, they're going to see things that they can relate to more than just like a project that they're watching some other universe about, right? So this is an invitation to learn more about our city, but at the same time for all the viewers to think about their own communities, their own homes, and how all these stories, people, and lessons can affect them on a daily basis now going forward.
I think Neal hit it on the head, really. It's just an authentic and honest look at Chicago. It's not pushing a particular narrative. It doesn't have the feeling of having had a preconceived narrative that they shot each scene to fit within. And I think that's one of the things that I appreciated most about it. Chicago is known for many things, depending upon who you ask. When I travel internationally and you tell people you're from Chicago, I mean, there's these phases, there's these eras. So at one point when I traveled, it was, oh, Michael Jordan. At another point for a long time, it was, oh, Barack Obama. And, for
Al Capone.
Don't forget Al Capone.
Right, exactly. Al Capone. Yeah. So you have these sort of icons that are connected to the city and kind of drive the reputation. And now in the era of President Trump, it's, oh, Chicago, shootings, violence, and that sort of negative connotation. I think what this film does is it allows both Chicagoans and non-Chicagoans to see their city through probably the most objective lens that you'll ever see it. Chicago is known for the allegiance to where you're from, if you're West Side, South Side, Southwest Side, North Side, East Side. But you see the whole city for what it is in an objective way, in ways that you probably wouldn't see if you didn't spend a lot of time on those other sides of the city. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And it's, as Neal said, it's honest. So you see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we have to reckon with that. And I think this is a space where people are at least, they might begin to see the city in ways that they have never seen it or experienced it before.
Yeah, I'd just add one little thing. I mean, Amara said, that, because people ask me and ask us now in interviews and stuff, like, what do you want people outside Chicago to take away from the film? Well, Amara's pointed out, it's like people in Chicago can learn something about their own city here, because we do have this tendency, many of us, to live in a certain bubble, a certain neighborhood, and a certain mindset of what what our world is, and we don't get outside of it. I know that one thing we absolutely consciously wanted to avoid doing was to spend an inordinate amount of time on Chicago's urban violence problem. I mean, we did a whole film about that some years ago, called The Interrupters, that Zak and I did together. That's all that film was about in a lot of ways. But we felt like that reputation of Chicago as the capital of murder city and all of that people outside Chicago needed to see other aspects of Chicago. And while we didn't want to shy away from the reality, we also wanted to think about what do people need to see of Chicago that broadens their understanding and gives them a deeper understanding of what this city is.
And one thing I would just add quickly is just how, I think one of the other ideas here is that to show how Chicago is kind of a reflection of the country, and to see these different pockets, these different bubbles, these, I don't think this gives anything away, but the way that, depending on, in these scenes that are juxtaposed about how people are engaged or not engaged with the Jason Van Dyke, Laquan McDonald murder trial. And just seeing the different experiences that people are having and levels of engagement, it's easy to get in your own world and think that this is the way it is, but to see that, we're sort of reflecting the country in that regard.
So a couple of people have asked questions like, are you going to keep going? This could be a longer project.
Yes.
What are you going to do with all that leftover footage?
Write us a check.
Can you do an extended version?
Look at that, Steve. They want it to be longer.
We want to.
And I know as a creator, whether it's a 3-minute audio story or a book, at some point you have to say, "This is it. I'm done. No going back." So how? But you might not feel that way. How?
Well, only some of our politicians thought that.
Zak and I joke, but it's not really a joke, that if someone would fund us, and we're very cheap.
We're
very cheap. If someone would fund us, we would probably keep making this thing, and maybe every year or so we turn out an episode or two, because it was such an amazing experience, and there is so much more to tell. As Neal said, it's like there's a lot in there, but man, there's so much that's not in there.
Yeah, so much.
And more happening every day.
I would just add real quick that we. I don't know what the plan is for these, but there are some scenes that were cut. I think about a dozen, 10 or 12 that National Geographic has in their possession. They're going to put them out there at some point. But one that comes to mind is, there was a candidate for alderman, Jaime Guzman, who ran against Ed Burke, and we detailed his campaign pretty closely, and have stuff in the office. He's out canvassing. It's a great scene. And so some of that stuff will see the light of day at some point. I'm just not sure the plans for that.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it'll inspire a lot of young people to run for office. To be honest with you, I really hope it does, because they can do it. Like we learned, Amara's been through it a few times now, so she's a vet, even though she's only in her 30s.
Yeah.
But recovery. That's right. But we can do it. Like they can do it, and I hope that footage comes out, Zak.
Well, I tell you, when people, anecdotally, when we've shown it to people or been to the few festivals we were able to go to before the pandemic shut everything down, people were like, I hope Amara, I hope Neal, I hope they're going to run again.
Are they going to run?
They're going to run again, aren't they? Yeah. I was like, I don't know.
Ask them.
How do you all feel about that?
I would advise Steve, every time somebody asks that or says that, you should look at them and say, "You're next." Okay, you're next.
That might quiet them up a little bit. I think it's what the documentary does is it does show some of the behind the scenes of what it's actually like to run for office, but specifically, especially in the Chicago context, to do it outside of the machine, to do it against incredible odds, to do it when a couple million people probably don't think that you deserve to do it, have the background to do it, have the money to do it, have the connections to do it. You just, through our experiences, myself, Neal, and a few of the other individuals who weren't career politicians, you actually get to see what it means to take on something that some would consider impossible or unwise or just crazy. And for those of us who are rightly motivated, I mean, Neal mentions it a lot. Like you just want to help people in the city. There's no hidden agenda. There's no, this isn't a very calculated, I want to climb this political ladder, at least for myself. Speaking for myself, that's never been a desire or a career goal of mine. You get to see the challenges of that kind of experience. And so anyone who watches that, I think you would think, what you do have to weigh, how can you be effective and the cost of running for office? Because there is a cost to run for office. There's a personal cost. There's definitely a financial cost, but there's an emotional cost to it. And those are the things that I think we don't really talk that much about, because it's, first of all, the focus is always on who wins the election, but also because of the nature of politics, it's so cynical almost that you forget that these are human beings that have made a decision that requires some level of sacrifice to go down this path. And I think that's what, at least for myself and folks like Neal, that's the decision that we made.
Thanks for saying that, because I was going to say the same thing. I mean, we are cynical, especially the press corps. And one of the things watching this was remembering that these are humans, whether it's Gary McCarthy awkwardly walking around a press conference hoping somebody's going to talk to him.
Watch that scene, everybody. That is something.
Or the way he's really kind of smitten with you, Amara.
Took his family for a loop there in that scene.
Or, the parent, like, I'm sure your parents, Neal, might have said, please don't run, like your mother, and just what the emotion, Amara seeing your family. And so while there is so much to be cynical about, present company excluded, it is important, I think, to see the humanism behind these people who, yes, made a choice to run and to put themselves out there. But that kind of behind the scenes to me, because even if they're behind the scenes with reporters, is not the same as what this filming showed.
Yeah, Natalie, it's all about access too. And if we make it more human, we make it more accessible and more relatable. And then they see Amara's family, they see my family, they see all these other families, and they go, wow, these people are like me. Like they're much closer to us than we are far away. We're all in this together. And the fact that we're just little snippets in the story, and if you take the aggregate, it's mostly just regular people in Chicago being filmed. I think that's the power here.
We fell in love with both these guys' families. And I just have to say, Mara letting us see her go home to do her laundry.
Yeah, that was great. That was great.
I mean, how many mayoral candidates have allowed that, right?
I know. When I saw you clear that out, I thought, oh yeah.
And they're worried, and your brother's worried you're going to steal something.
Yeah.
I mean, the siblings dynamics, no matter how old you are, the sibling dynamics do not go away.
Not at all.
We're coming to a close, and I purposefully did not want this conversation to really get into Lori Lightfoot's first year. I wanted to talk about the film in your work, but I'm sure there are people who are thinking, how could you not even mention Lori Lightfoot? So as we close out, I think I'll just turn it to you if you want to say anything about watching her in the film, or like how things have gone for her the first year and a half.
I'm happy to say something. I know you guys will have, but it was interesting because during the campaign, Lori was one of those people that got it and allowed us in over the objections, frankly, of her press people at that time. We had to circumvent them to get the access that we got, and thank goodness we did, given that she won. But it was interesting to circle back around to her now for episode 5. It was a lot harder. She's in the seat of power, and it's different. Even though she was very warm and friendly to us to allow us to do the interviews that we did and whatever. But it's a whole different animal when you're in the seat, right? And And one of the things we tried to navigate in episode 5 was to not turn the entire episode into a referendum on her leadership, but at the same time, sort of take gauge of the forces at work, both for her and against her, that go on in the city, which I think will surprise a lot of people outside of Chicago, because they're unaware of what goes on here in Chicago in terms of that. And so I hope we navigated it well. We tried, but it was a whole different animal than riding around in her car with her during the campaign.
Yeah.
Amara, I know you were going to say something.
Yeah. So I think there's always going to be a difference between usually there's a difference between being the candidate and then being in the seat. And as Steve said, once you get into the seat, it's a different ball game. I'm not 100%. I'm not actually really surprised at how the first year has gone. And that's because I had more background and context into the mayor before she became the mayor. So there was a reason why I was very clear about whether I would endorse either of the two remaining candidates at the end. I was very particular about that. So I'm not surprised at how things have gone in the opposition to a lot of the things that she's done the first year. That said, who could have predicted a pandemic? Who could have predicted, global uprisings? No one could have predicted that. And one of the challenges of leadership is that you're not always in control. You can't control necessarily the things that happen. And the difficult part is you have to wear the jacket for those things. And that's what, we look at people in power sometimes and we think we could just do everything that they do. And that's not necessarily the case. Granted, there are things that I would do drastically different, but I also believe in extending grace to people in leadership positions, because they're going to have to make decisions that are difficult, that are not popular, and that could frankly create opposition. And I think she's just experiencing all of that right now. But for me, that's why in campaigning, I was always very clear that whatever I'm telling you now as a candidate is what I will push for. I'm not going to say that I'll be successful in things that I'm pushing for, but I knew I didn't want there to be a disconnect between what I was saying in my track record and then what I would do if I ever was in the seat.
Right. And just to build off of what Amara said, it is strange, and Amara, you know this, to walk into City Hall and for folks to know who you are, right? To you're marked, So going in there, I have to say, I'm doing what I can to help and be supported behind the scenes. I'm not heavily involved, but I'm definitely I spend a good amount of time still studying that budget, because y'all know that's important to me. So I'm following the money nonstop. But I do have I guess a small piece of advice. If anybody out there is watching this who's knows Lori, I know Lori, but I think it's really important right now, regardless of whatever detailed choices and difficult decisions that are happening in City Hall, to also make sure that this city has an inspiring leader, and they have somebody who is activating them and making them feel like they need to focus on their block, their home, their neighborhood, and their community to make it better. Because it's not just taking the action and being decisive and being very kind of clear and marshaling with your progress, but at the same time, you need to activate the emotional connection that people have to the city to take care of each other. So I need a lot more of that. And that would be the primary feedback and advice I would give to Lori Lightfoot, is make sure that you dig deep to inspire people at the same time as you have to deal with the hardship of having one of the toughest jobs in America. So, with all that, I still wish her the best, and I want her to do a great job. I know she's not perfect. Who is? And then I will probably have even more critique as time comes on, because I'm definitely watching that budget like a hawk.
Yeah, I mean, there's a scene in episode 5 that's that Zach and I are really fond of, where Rhymefest is speaking to a group of protesters, and I love that speech, because to me, he is attempting to speak to Lori as an auntie, trying to find a common ground, to speak to her, to tell her that very message, I think, that you just said there, Neal.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful speech to me. I'm sure Lori's going to see episode 5. I hope when she sees that speech, she takes it to heart, because I think it has a lot of wisdom in it.
Yeah, and I love that speech too, because he says it in a way that you can't ignore him, because he's not shouting, he's not attacking, he's talking the same way I'm talking now, but with more love and compassion. And I just would add at the very end here, I know we're running out of time, but I think the decision to do episode 5, the fact that we were able to do that, I think without episode 5, we don't have the opportunity to show the mayor as the leader, as the power, as a more complicated figure. And I do think that, in the extremely bumpy road that's been 2020, that's an aspect that episode 5 gives to the series, that when we thought we had finished, that was one thing, because we were editing while she was the mayor for 6 or 8 or 9 months, and so we knew the teacher strike happened, for instance, and we were still editing, but there was no way that we could incorporate any of this into the series. And while we still didn't incorporate that into the series, we were able to show, I hope, her as a more complicated figure.
Great. Well, thanks to each of you for being here this afternoon. Thanks for your work, and thanks to the audience for their questions. Have a great afternoon, Natalie. Everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great to see everybody. Thanks for the great questions.
Enjoy the film.